we do need to firstly see schools in a certain light, which is that they're about a couple of centuries old, mostly a creation of the 18th and early 19th centuries. And they had a very specific purpose because that was a different world. It was a military and later a military-industrial world. I think there were two kinds of schooling invented. One kind for children in the home country, the country that's ruling, and there were several, I mean, there was there was, of course, the British, then there were the Spanish, the Prussians, so each had huge portions of the planet. So there was the home country. So in the home country, you needed a schooling on how to govern and how to rule. And you needed very large numbers of people to be produced who would do that. And in the colonized countries, you needed an even large number of people who would actually carry out those tasks of governance. So we're all familiar with the story at this end, but it's the same story whether you look at Canada or Australia and all the Latin American countries and so on. So it was actually an interesting sort of design, and the design was to produce identical people. So we have to realize that that's kind of the built-in design inside schools. But let me now tell you where I got into all this from. And it was essentially through this one experiment in Delhi, an experiment which is not of any value right now because it's kind of completely self-evident right now. Anybody who has seen a 3-year-old with an iPad would know what this experiment is about. But in 1999, it was unbelievable. And nobody could understand. I'll tell you what the experiment was. The experiment was to see what would happen if children were confronted with a computer, particularly a computer connected to the internet. And 1999 was a time when there were millions of children in India who had never seen a computer. So my curiosity was in what would happen if they saw one. And the answer was, what was considered very surprising in those days, that they would teach themselves how to use the internet. So what did the hole-in-the-wall experiment actually say? And it's all published, it's up there on the web, you can read it. It basically says that groups of unsupervised children, when left with the internet in a safe and public environment, will go from a sort of literacy level of 0 to that of the average office secretary in the West within a period of 9 months, irrespective of who they are and where they are and so on. Which is kind of absurd because what does it say about training and the purpose of training and so on? The mystery was that if you saw those children opening Paint, now that's the first day that they've ever touched a computer. But you saw the speed with which those the windows started to pop up. The mystery was, how was that happening? You would have expected people to very hesitantly do trial and error, but that's not what was happening on the screen, and that's a genuine video from the first few minutes. It was just going pop, 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 and what they were saying in Marathi was, let's draw something. And they open up Paint, and this is something that you can do very easily actually, in any place. It's quite easy to do. What you have to do is, you take a classroom, or any room for that matter, empty it of most of the furniture, put in about 4 or 5 computers with big screens. Remember, safe public access. So big screens, internet access, and then you bring in, suppose you've got 5 or 6 computers, bring in 25 children. I work mostly with, 8 to 13, 14 Nowadays more with 16, 17 as well. So that kind. You bring in 25, let's say 9-year-olds, and you ask them a question. So you don't do anything about, you don't provide any explanations or any instructions. So the first thing I noticed when I did that in England, they were no longer disengaged, because now they were curious. So they came in and they said, so where are all the other computers? So I said, I don't know. That's all we have here, 6. Why do we have so few? I said, well, I just told you I don't know. So I realized something very important about schooling, I guess. Children are not used to hearing a teacher say, I don't know. Okay, so they didn't know how to react, all right? So then you make up a question. And you can't just make up any old question. I mean, certainly not a boring, CBSE kind of question. What you do is you take anything curricular, but you reduce it to a question which is far more interesting than what the curricular topic sounds like. I'll give you an example of something I did in China some time ago, which is that the topic that the teacher was going to teach was trigonometry. And as I think we all know, it's not the most interesting subject on the planet. So children naturally sort of sit there yawning. So the teacher said, I have this attention problem. So I said, okay, let's try something. So I went in and I said, do you have iPads? Yeah, we have iPads, but we are not allowed to use them. So I said, no, never mind, don't use them, but I have a question. The question is, how does the iPad know where it is? So they said, what do you mean? I said, on your iPad, if you say, where are you? The iPad shows you on a map, says you are here. How does it know that? So they didn't know. Well, we don't know. I said, well, why don't you use the internet and find out? Oh, it's not allowed in school. So I said, no, for a moment, let's say that it is allowed. It's not allowed in class. So I said, well, suppose you are allowed to take out your device and use it. So when they started doing that, then I restricted the number, again, without giving them any explanation. I said, no, there are 25 of you, just use 5. Because remember, unsupervised groups and public access. So if I tell them to make groups, then that's prescriptive. But if I restrict the number of computers, what choice do they have except make groups? So but this time they have, thank you very much. But this time they have made the groups themselves. So that's a big difference between where you have told them to make groups and where they have decided to make groups. And then after some time they said, it uses GPS. So I said, well, that's only a 3-letter word. What does it mean? So, well, it uses satellites. Oh, okay. So how many satellites? They said 3. So I said, isn't that funny? It's not 4, it's not 27, it's not 1, it's 3. Why is it 3? So some more researching later. As I've got my fingers crossed, so some more researching later they come back. I say, there's a subject called trigonometry. It uses that. So then I say, well, would you like to know how exactly it calculates that and why it needs 3? Now the response from the same class is yes. So then I tell the math teacher, I've got them now. The door is open. Now you go ahead with your sine and cosine of angle and this, that, and all of that. They'll listen to all that because it's telling them how their iPad knows where it is. So that's what I mean by, we gave it a name, we called it a big question. A big question is one where the process of researching leads you into various areas of the curriculum. And a big question is one that you would be intrinsically interested in, not just as a student, but also as a teacher. So what are the rules of the game, or the non-rules of the game? You make your own groups, because I haven't told you to make groups. You can change groups anytime you like. If you're in a group and you figure that they're no good, you can go and change your group and join another group. You can talk as much as you want within your group or across groups. And this one's really hard for even children to take. You can walk across and see what another group is doing and then come back to your own group and report. Okay? Which, in England, when I first proposed this, their first reaction was, "You mean cheating?" So I said, no, it's not called cheating, it's called sharing. Because this is not a competition. I'm not asking you who finds the answer out first. I'm saying, as a room, what answer do you come up with? So it's not cheating. And you say, I'm going to give you 20 minutes. 20 is probably too short, maybe 30. At the end of that, I want 2 presentations. For the sake of argument, it could be 3, it could be 1. What you'll find is, every group wants to make a presentation. And what I do is I purposely say we don't have time for every group, so it has to be only 2. Oh, but so whose presentation should it be? I said, I don't know. You decide. So now, yet another skill. How do you get consensus of opinion of who's your best presenter and what's the best material to present? Okay? I think it's really good training for children to do that sort of thing. Usually, each time you'll find that you've got a surprise. You've got an answer at a level which you didn't expect. Almost any time that you do it. You also get, when you start the soul, you get this humongous amount of noise. Then you find 2 things will happen. One is you find what I call flocking behavior. Suddenly you find that the groups have changed and almost all the children are on one computer. It means some discovery has happened there. And then they disperse again and new groups form. And then they flock again and then disperse again, like that. The noise suddenly reduces, sometimes down to a whisper. This means that there is now something to discuss. And then when the presentation happens, it's quiet and it's almost at the level of adults. So what does a soul do actually? Well, firstly, it's giving, when I measure, there's a pretty rapid improvement in English reading comprehension. Why? Well, I think because the internet doesn't know that they are children. So it throws everything it has at them. The children don't know what they are and what they are not supposed to read. So they start quoting from the Harvard Business Review or something like that. They don't know they're not supposed to do that. Well, at least we tell them they're not supposed to do that. So the quality of the output changes, the quality of the input changes. And that's why you get these really surprising results out of souls. I did an experiment once in Pune, again with children who have very little English. It wasn't even using computers. I just gave them a long English sentence. I think the sentence was that increase in the number of auto rickshaws in Pune is causing traffic problems. Now, it's way above what these children can read. And they were sitting in a ring around this sentence, and I said, well, you tell me what that means. And they did in about, I guess, 10, 15 minutes. What's the mechanism? From what little I can understand, one child says to the other, that word is problem. So this is about problems. Another child says, that's an auto. Okay, I think she's a daughter of an auto driver or something like that. So that's an auto rickshaw. Auto rickshaw problem. More guesswork. And then in Marathi they said, too many auto rickshaws causing a problem in Pune. So then I thought, what is this? Is this reading? It's some form of collective reading. Then I got to think about reading in general. Do you realize that we consider reading to be a solitary activity, but the only reason we do that is because of the form factor, the technology of printing. Books are printed in a way so that two people can't read it at the same time. So this has given us this psychological feeling that reading is a solitary activity. But today it's not, because you can put text on a big screen. So now 5 people can read it. And what I'm finding is that when 5 people read it, they read at a reading comprehension level which is higher than the highest in the group. So for the generation that is growing up, I would ask the question, what does reading mean for them? Is it the process of being able to look at squiggles on a piece of paper and figure out the words, or is it something else? Okay, back to the experiments. In these self-organized learning environment experiments, I had noticed that that obviously the teacher should not interfere at all. That spoils the whole process. If you go up there and say, what are you looking for? Finished, the whole soul stops. But if you go up there and say, wow, how on earth did you get to a website like that? I've never seen that. That looks really interesting. That helps. So I thought about what should I call this way? And I decided, just like that, to call it the method of the grandmother. You know, the parent and the teacher uses a method which is very different from the method that grandparents use. Grandparents use admiration as the pedagogical tool. When I was your age, I was such a foolish little girl, I couldn't understand anything. And the child says, you don't even understand this. Now let me show you something more. So she's driving a learning spiral using admiration as a pedagogical tool. So why not bring that into school? There are a whole series of experiments which show that groups of children in unsupervised internet environments can teach themselves almost anything. I haven't found a limit. But so far so good, all the good news. But here comes the bad news, which is countries don't assess all of this. Okay, so all those are nice results, nice things to have for children, but who wants them? The examination board doesn't want them. So what does one do? So I started looking at the examination system itself. Where did that come from? That you must sit alone and I'll give you a question and you'll answer on pencil and paper. Where did it come from and why? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to check by showing you a picture. I'm going to show you a picture of an office from, I think, about 1910. You see that? It's from our great-grandfather's time, I guess. Rows and rows of clerks. What are the 3 important attributes of each person? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Don't talk to anybody. Listen to instructions. Don't be creative. Do your work. Okay, this was, we heads of schools were actually told to produce people like that, because otherwise how will that place run? And a floor supervisor who walks up and down. But the only thing is, in 2016, why does the exam hall look like that? But don't you think that I've got the answer of what's happening here? We're producing people for dead employers, you know, many of us. And some of us are struggling to change away from that. So, if you consider the learner and the internet device together as a composite entity, what is school for? You have to redefine school completely. I've come to this conclusion and I want to leave this with you. We cannot prevent the internet from coming into an exam, no matter what we do. Either we let it in from today, we design for it, or we will be forced to do it 2 years from now. It's our choice which way we want to go. The only way to do it is that you make a question which you cannot answer in 5 minutes if you had the internet. You have to think. So your question has to start with, what do you think? use the internet, and then see what happens. We need people to experiment with this format. So, okay, maybe CBSE won't change, but your school can internally change to your internal examinings, and then see what happens.